Everyone laughed when Sarah pulled up in that old, faded coupe. The paint was chipped, the tires looked worn, and the engine gave a shaky growl that made people turn their heads for all the wrong reasons. In a neighborhood where shiny new cars were a status symbol, her decision to buy a used car raised more than a few eyebrows. Friends whispered behind her back. Some even told her to her face, "Why waste your money on that junk?" Asterisk. But Sarah wasn't looking for approval. She was looking for something different, something with a story. She'd always believed there was beauty in things most people overlooked. And that little car, it wasn't just some beat-up vehicle to her. It had a soul. Something about the curves, the sound, the way it handled, clumsy yet full of character, told her it had potential. But no one else saw it. They only saw the rust. They only saw the past. What Sarah saw was the future. Weeks turned into months, and every spare moment she had went into researching, restoring, and rebuilding. She wasn't a mechanic, but she learned. She watched videos, got her hands dirty, and slowly started bringing the old car back to life. People still mocked her, rolled their eyes when they saw her tinkering in the driveway. But she kept going, quietly, determined. Then, something unexpected happened. One afternoon, at a local car meet she'd only dared to attend as a spectator, something caught everyone's attention. A hush swept over the crowd as her car rolled in, no longer rusty, no longer ignored. The same people who once laughed now leaned in closer, asking questions, snapping photos, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. But what exactly did Sarah do to turn that junk into a collector's gem? Sarah hadn't planned on becoming the center of attention that day. In fact, she almost didn't go. She told herself the car still wasn't perfect. The dashboard still had a crack, one headlight needed adjusting, and the interior smelled faintly of old leather and engine oil. But something inside her whispered, "Just go." So she did. And the moment the car rolled onto the lot, heads began to turn, not in mockery this time, but in awe. What most people didn't know was that the car wasn't just old, it was rare. A limited-run European model from the late 80s that never got much love in the US. Only a few hundred had made it overseas, and even fewer had survived in drivable condition. Sarah had stumbled on it purely by accident, sitting dusty and forgotten behind a repair shop on the edge of town. The price was low, almost suspiciously low, but something about it felt right. She didn't know it then, but she'd just bought what collectors now called a hidden gem. Back then, all she had was a gut feeling and a small savings account. She knew it would take more than a fresh coat of paint to make it roadworthy. But it wasn't just about restoring a car. It became something personal. Maybe it was the challenge. Maybe it was proving everyone wrong. Or maybe it was the way that little engine coughed to life for the first time under her care. Whatever it was, Sarah threw herself into it, piece by piece, bolt by bolt. Still, she never expected anyone to notice. Not the online forums, not the car meet crowd, and definitely not the man in the crowd that day who would change everything with just one quiet question. He was older, maybe in his late 50s, wearing a worn leather jacket and sunglasses that didn't quite hide the way his eyes locked onto the car. While everyone else was asking about paint codes and engine mods, he stayed quiet, just observing. Then, as Sarah leaned against the hood, answering a question about the rebuilt carburetor, he stepped forward and asked softly, "Where did you find this car?" Something about the way he asked it stopped her. It wasn't casual. It was careful, measured. She told him briefly, just enough to be polite, but his follow-up made her uneasy. "You know what you have, don't you?" Sarah nodded, half sure, but the way he looked at her made her doubt everything she thought she knew. Turns out, he wasn't just a car enthusiast. He used to be a collector. Serious, well-connected. He said he'd only seen one other model like hers in the last decade, and it had disappeared without a trace after being sold overseas. Now, he wanted to know everything. The VIN, the history, who sold it to her. But Sarah didn't have all the answers. The seller was vague, cash only, and didn't give much backstory. She hadn't thought much of it at the time. That's when things got strange. A few days after the car meet, she noticed another vehicle parked near her street. Same car, same spot, multiple times. Not close enough to be obvious, but enough to make her feel watched. Then came the messages. Anonymous, asking if she was willing to sell. No names, just offers. Big offers. Too big for a car that most people thought was scrap 6 months ago. The car had gone from being laughed at to being the center of attention. But not all attention is good, and Sarah was starting to wonder. What had she really uncovered? The messages didn't stop. They came through email, social media, even a handwritten note slipped under her windshield one morning. Each one was more urgent than the last, offering cash, trades, even overseas shipping within 24 hours. And yet, none of the offers came with a name. Sarah started sleeping with her curtains drawn and double-checking the locks on her garage. This wasn't just about a rare car anymore. It felt like something else, something bigger. She tried to shake it off, telling herself it was just collector hype. Cars like hers, vintage, limited-run models, had started gaining value online. A few had recently sold at auction for jaw-dropping prices, and maybe word had just spread. But still, she couldn't ignore the feeling in her gut. Why would someone go to this length over one old car? Then, late one night, she heard it, the distinct click of her garage door creaking. She wasn't sure if it was the wind or something else, but when she grabbed a flashlight and went outside, the door was half open. Nothing looked taken, but her toolbox was moved. The glove compartment in the car was wide open, and a few documents she kept in there were missing. Whoever it was, they hadn't come for the car. They came for something inside it. Panicked, she called the only person who might understand, the older man from the car meet. She still had his card. When he picked up, she barely got the words out before he said, "You need to hide it." Now, that car's not just rare, it's wanted. And not just by collectors. Sarah's world spun. What had started as a project, a passion, was turning into a problem she couldn't explain. And with every passing hour, she was starting to realize she might be in over her head. Sarah didn't sleep that night. Every sound outside made her heart race. She'd moved the car into a friend's locked garage across town, but even that didn't feel safe anymore. The man from the meet, whose name she finally learned was Victor, kept his voice low every time they spoke. He was nervous too. He told her the model she had wasn't just rare. It had a rumored link to a prototype series used for confidential testing decades ago. There were whispers that one or two of the cars were fitted with hidden tech, long before the world ever knew it existed. At first, Sarah thought it sounded like a conspiracy theory, but then came the second twist. She received a package. No return address. Inside was a faded photo, yellowed at the edges. It showed a car almost identical to hers, parked near a military research facility. Scribbled on the back were just 2 words, "still watching." Her hands trembled as she read it over and over. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about secrets. Victor called again that evening, more urgent this time. He told her he'd reached out to an old contact, a retired auto engineer who'd worked on special projects back in the day. The man agreed to meet, but only in person, and only if Sarah brought the car. No photos, no recordings. He said he'd know immediately if hers was the one they'd lost track of. But Sarah wasn't sure she could risk it. Every move felt watched. Her phone had started acting strange, glitches, battery drains, apps opening on their own, and her social accounts. Someone had tried to reset her passwords. Now she wasn't just protecting a car, she was protecting something someone clearly didn't want found. And the deeper she looked, the more dangerous things were starting to feel. Sarah knew she had to take the risk. She arranged to meet the retired engineer just outside the city, in a quiet lot behind an old gas station. The car was covered with a tarp, tucked into a trailer, and she drove with her phone turned off, hoping no one could trace her. Victor followed in a separate car, just in case. The sun had barely risen when they arrived, and the man was already there, tall, grey-haired, with eyes that scanned every inch of the car the second she pulled back the cover. He didn't say a word at first, just circled the vehicle, running his hand along the body, inspecting details Sarah never even noticed. Finally, he opened the trunk and pulled back the lining. His fingers felt around until they hit something, a small metal latch hidden behind the insulation. With a quiet click, a false panel opened, revealing a dusty, sealed compartment. Inside, a black box, no bigger than a shoebox, wrapped in protective cloth. He looked at Sarah and said flatly, this wasn't supposed to be found. Inside the box were faded documents, blueprints, and a small data drive labeled with codes Sarah didn't understand. The engineer explained this was from a shelved military project involving early vehicle tracking and AI-assisted driving, decades before the tech went public. The cars had been destroyed, or so they thought. One had slipped through the cracks and somehow ended up in that dusty lot where Sarah found it. Victor stepped forward, warning that now that the truth was out, people wouldn't stop looking. He offered to help get the materials to a safe place. Sarah hesitated but agreed. They made a copy of the drive, storing the original somewhere secret. But days later, when Sarah went back to her friend's garage, the car was gone. No signs of a break-in, just tire marks, and a single message left on the floor in chalk, "We'll take it from here." She never saw the car again. But sometimes, when she's driving late at night, she swears she hears a faint, familiar growl of its engine trailing just behind her, then disappearing into the dark. In the weeks that followed, Sarah tried to return to her normal life, but things had changed. The garage felt empty without the car, but it wasn't just about the missing vehicle anymore. It was everything that had come with it, the mystery, the danger, the strange sense that she'd uncovered something meant to stay hidden. She still had the backup copy of the data drive, though she'd never opened it. Part of her didn't want to know more. Some secrets were better left alone. Victor stayed in touch, checking in now and then, always careful, always brief. He told her that whatever organization had taken the car, they were powerful and very good at making things disappear. The engineer vanished too. One day he just stopped answering, and his home was suddenly empty, like he'd never lived there at all. But even after everything, Sarah didn't regret her decision. That used car, the one everyone mocked, had taken her on a journey she never expected. It taught her not just about engines and restoration, but about trust, intuition, and the quiet courage it takes to follow your instincts when no one else sees what you see. Sometimes she'd think back to the moment she first saw it, sitting behind that old repair shop, forgotten, unwanted. She hadn't known what it was back then. She just knew it mattered. And in the end, she was right. Sarah never bought another car like it, but every now and then, when she hears someone dismiss an old vehicle as worthless, she smiles to herself, because she knows better than most that sometimes a used car isn't just a car, it's a story waiting to be told. And hers, that story will never be forgotten.